For the first 20 seconds, imagine a bull so powerful that even the metal gates around him looked tired. Not from his strength but from holding his fear. His name was Copper, not because he shined, but because life had burned him until he carried the color of hard earth and old pennies in his eyes. When the ranch hands walked past his pen, they didn't mutter warnings anymore. They whispered silence, the kind people give to storms they don't want to wake. On the day Thomas arrived, the wind blew steady across the fields, carrying dust, stories, and uncertainty. Thomas didn't look like a man who came to conquer anything. He looked like a man who had lost more than he cared to speak about. His shoulders held quiet weight, his boots told of miles walked alone, and his silence felt more honest than greetings ever could. He stood by Copper's pen, hands resting lightly on the fence. No loud steps. No judgment in his eyes. Just stillness, the kind a hurting soul recognizes instantly. The ranch foreman, Caleb, walked over with the skeptical look of someone who had tried patience before and seen it break. "That bull ain't worth your time," Caleb muttered. Thomas didn't move his eyes from Copper. "Maybe he ain't supposed to be worth time," he said softly. "Maybe he just needs someone to give it without counting." Caleb snorted. "You touch that gate, you'll find out why we keep everyone back." Thomas set his thermos down and leaned on the wood. "I ain't touching nothing. Just standing." "Standing won't fix him." Thomas exhaled, steady and slow. "Nothing fixes what isn't broken." "He's not broken. He's scared." "There's a difference." Copper lifted his head. His eyes did not roar, they pleaded. If sadness had a shape, it lived behind those eyes. Thomas did not move closer. He lowered his gaze instead, offering stillness like a blanket. In the background, men shook their heads. A few chuckled, expecting failure. But Copper didn't turn away. He didn't charge. He just watched, as if trying to remember a world where humans didn't reach first to take something. And Thomas whispered, almost to himself, "I came here to breathe again. Maybe you need the same." And for the first time that season, Copper did not back into the corner. He simply stood, not trusting, not fearing, just waiting. The second morning came quiet, like even the sunrise did not want to disturb anything fragile. Thomas walked to the pen with no rope, no bucket, no plans except presence. Copper stood farther today, not hiding but thinking, the way an injured soul measures the world before stepping into it. Dust lifted around his hooves, not from movement, but from the air itself, making room for something unspoken. A ranch hand leaned on the fence nearby, chewing on straw. "You know, most men try to break him," he said. Thomas didn't turn. "That's why most men fail," he replied calmly. Copper flicked an ear, watching them without lifting his head. His breath came in slow bursts, not angry, aching. Thomas set a biscuit on the rail and sat down on an old feed sack. Not close enough to threaten, not far enough to abandon. "I ain't here to win," he murmured, voice carrying like a prayer caught in morning wind. "I'm here to be someone who doesn't leave just because healing takes time." The ranch hand scoffed. "Talking to him won't make him gentle." Thomas shrugged. "Talking to myself didn't make me whole either. But showing up again did." He didn't look at Copper. He looked at the dirt between them, like the ground itself held truth. Copper's tail twitched once and a small, uncertain step shifted his weight. Not forward. Not back. Just alive. Present. "People forget," Thomas whispered, "that even animals remember the hands that fed them and the ones that hurt them. Fear stays longer than food." Copper lifted his head then, eyes sharp, meeting Thomas's gaze for the first time, not with challenge but confusion. As if asking, "Why aren't you fighting me? Why aren't you afraid? Why aren't you like the rest?" Thomas looked away first, not out of weakness but respect. In the animal world, that gesture said, "You have space. You have choice." A gust of wind rattled a loose gate hinge. Copper flinched, muscles tight as wire. Thomas didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't shush him. He just breathed slow, deep, steady, like breathing could be a bridge. "Easy," he murmured. "Noise doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it's just sound." Copper's body softened again, only a fraction but enough for the ranch hand to blink hard. "He ain't doing his usual panic thing," the man whispered in disbelief. Thomas rested his elbows on his knees. "He's remembering peace. Maybe for the first time." Copper didn't trust yet, but he didn't look away. Sometimes healing starts not with a step forward, but with simply not running. Day 3 did not bring miracles, only small shifts that mattered more than anyone else noticed. Copper stood near the center of the pen this time, not pressed against the far boards as usual. He wasn't rushing toward Thomas, but he wasn't retreating either. He stood like someone who remembered fear but didn't feel ruled by it for a brief breath. Thomas approached slowly, same pace as the sun climbing the sky, each step quiet and careful, like he didn't want the earth to feel startled. He didn't speak right away. He didn't offer food. He just sat down the same way he had before, on that old feed sack, elbows relaxed on his knees, hands open, palms resting up as though his fingers carried no expectations. A ranch boy leaned on the fence, chewing jerky and squinting. "You ain't touched him yet," he called out. Thomas nodded without looking up. "Trust touches the heart first. The body comes later." The boy frowned. "Sounds like talk for folks who lost already." Thomas exhaled. "Maybe that's why I understand him. Losing isn't the end, it's just quiet before trying again." Copper lowered his head slightly. Dust drifted around him, curling in the morning light like soft smoke. He took one slow step forward, hoofs sinking into the soil. Then another, smaller, hesitant but real. Thomas didn't move. His stillness was not forced. It was patient, the kind born from hurting and healing and learning that rushing ruins everything tender. A worker nearby whispered, "A bull that size should charge if he's coming close." Thomas shook his head gently. "A bull that size only charges if someone made him think they had to." Copper sniffed the air, his thick shoulders rising with breath. He looked at Thomas the way someone looks at a door they aren't sure they want to walk through yet. His ears twitched. His tail swayed once like a tired sigh. He wanted to trust, that much showed. Then suddenly, a feed basket fell from a hook behind the barn, loud, sharp, unplanned. Copper flinched hard, hooves scraping dirt, chest lifting like thunder. The boy froze. The workers stiffened. Thomas didn't budge. "It's all right," he whispered low and steady. "Not every noise comes to take something from you." Copper's muscles trembled, but slowly, painfully slowly, he lowered his head again, breath shaking out like wind leaving a storm cloud. Thomas smiled, not triumphant but gentle. "The world can be loud," he whispered, "but you don't have to fear every sound now." And Copper stayed. Not because he trusted completely, but because a tiny, stubborn part of him wanted to learn how. The fourth morning arrived with a sky stretched wide and soft, the kind that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Copper stood nearer than ever before, close enough that dust from Thomas's boots drifted toward him. He wasn't calm, not yet, but his fear wasn't sharp anymore. It was tired, confused, searching. Thomas settled onto his feed sack again, the fabric creasing beneath his weight like it had begun to learn him just as the bull had. He rested his hands on his thighs and spoke without urgency, without need to be heard, but loud enough for a heart to listen if it wanted. "You don't have to trust me today," he murmured. "Just don't leave." A ranch hand leaned on the fence, eyebrows furrowed. "Sitting here again? When you gonna do something?" Thomas kept his eyes on the dirt. "I am doing something. Looks like nothing." Thomas breathed slowly. Sometimes nothing is what wounded things need most. Copper's ears angled forward, nostrils flaring at the morning air. He took a few steps, steady but uncertain, like every inch closer felt like stepping over fragments of old hurt. His gaze flicked between Thomas and the horizon. Flight lingered in his bones, but so did a question. And questions were powerful. A ranch hand whispered, "You think he remembers you from yesterday?" Thomas nodded slightly. "Fear remembers fast. But peace remembers slow. I'm giving him time to remember me the right way." Copper lowered his head, sniffing at something invisible, maybe scent, maybe emotion. Then, with cautious grace, he moved close enough that the wooden rail between them felt thin, like a line meant to be crossed only when ready. Thomas didn't reach. Didn't break the fragile air. Instead, he plucked a small apple slice from his pocket and set it gently on the dirt, not pushing it toward Copper, not offering it with a hand. "Choice," he whispered. "You get to choose everything today." The bull didn't rush. He watched the apple like it was a memory he was trying to trust again. Slowly he lowered his head, breathed across it and nudged it with his nose. He didn't eat it, but he didn't walk away either. For Thomas that was enough. Then a voice rose behind them. "Boy, you wasting your life on a hopeless case." Thomas didn't turn. "I wasted years trying to fix people who never wanted to be understood. Time here isn't wasted." Copper lifted his head again and didn't step back. And in that quiet moment something shifted, not in the bull, not in the man, but in the space between them. A space once filled with fear now held possibility, like an old gate creaking open just an inch. Sometimes change didn't roar. Sometimes it breathed. Day 5 carried a strange stillness, the kind that feels like the world is waiting politely, unsure whether to hold hope or brace for heartbreak. Copper stood near the front of the pen again, chest rising and falling slow, eyes softer than the first day but still carrying storms in the corners. Trust was not born yet, but fear was no longer the only thing living there. Thomas arrived without hurry, without expectation. He didn't carry food this time, no bait, no reward. Only the same quiet presence that Copper had begun to recognize. He stopped at the fence, rested one hand lightly on the rail and waited. Not staring, not avoiding, simply there. A young ranch helper wandered over, arms crossed, curiosity mixed with doubt. "Aren't you gonna feed him today?" Thomas shook his head. "Trust that needs a treat isn't trust. It's trade. I want him to want peace, not buy it." Copper flicked an ear, watching Thomas like someone reading a language they once knew but forgot. His breath came out warm and slow, dust swirling around his nostrils. He took one cautious step forward. Then another. Not confident, but trying. Thomas lowered himself to the ground again, not on the sack today, directly on the dirt, palms resting open on his knees. "You're allowed to think," he said softly. "Nobody's chasing you. Nobody's pushing you." From the rail, the young helper frowned. "I don't get it." Thomas smiled the smallest bit. "He's been pushed enough. Now I'm letting him come forward on his own time." Copper stood just a few feet away now, the air between them thick with unspoken history. His tail swayed once, not irritated, thoughtful. He dipped his head, sniffing closer to Thomas than ever before. Then came a test the earth itself might have planned. A truck door slammed in the distance, sharp, sudden. Copper jerked, hooves scraping, breath catching tight. The ranch hands tensed, ready to jump the fence if needed. But Thomas didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't even lift his head. He just breathed slow. Calm. Solid. Like a tree in the wind that refuses to snap. "It's all right," he whispered. "That sound can't hurt you. You're not where you used to be." Copper shook once. Old instinct, but he didn't bolt. He didn't run. He exhaled, long and deep, like a creature exhausted from being afraid of ghosts. And then, in a moment no one expected, he lowered his head, not in fear but in relief. A ranch hand whispered in disbelief. He didn't panic. He chose to stay. Thomas spoke quietly, almost to the dust. "He's learning safety. One breath at a time." Copper blinked slowly and stood firm, not because he trusted the world yet but because he trusted this moment. And healing always begins in one moment. White heavy checkmark section 6, 400 words. By the 6th morning, word had spread across the ranch like wind through tall grass. The bull who once carried storms in his body was beginning to breathe softer. No one believed it at first. Some came out early just to witness if it was real or some strange streak of luck that would snap back into chaos. Copper stood near the front of his pen again, hooves settled in soft dirt, head lifted but not high with aggression. High with awareness, curiosity even. Thomas approached with the same gentle pace, the same quiet mind that had earned him more progress than any rope or stick ever could. He didn't sit yet. He leaned on the fence rail and just watched Copper breathe. A slow rhythm. A fragile rhythm. Like someone relearning a song they once knew before fear stole it. "You showed up again," Thomas murmured, voice soft enough to blend with morning light. Sometimes that's all healing asks for. Behind him, 2 ranch hands stood with coffee mugs and disbelief on their faces. "You sure you don't want to put a halter on him soon?" one said. Thomas shook his head slightly. "A halter without trust is just decoration on fear." Copper blinked, tail flicking only once. His body stayed steady, no trembling, no panic humming beneath skin. Thomas took a single step inside the pen, not far but symbolic. He lowered himself onto his knees, grounding himself. He kept his shoulders rounded slightly, posture soft, as if he came not to dominate space but to share it. Copper watched, muscles rolling once like a memory trying to rise then settling again. Thomas reached into his pocket, not for food, not for reward, but for a simple handful of grass he plucked on the walk over. He placed it gently on the ground beside him. "This time," Thomas whispered, "I bring nothing sweet. Only what the earth gives freely." Copper took a breath so deep it stirred dust near his hooves. He stepped forward. Slow. Careful. Each hoof pressing into earth like a quiet promise. When he reached the grass he didn't rush. He lowered his head, sniffed and began to eat, not out of hunger but out of comfort. Out of choice. A ranch worker whispered wide-eyed, "He's eating near him, with no fear." Thomas didn't smile big. Healing didn't need loud celebrations. His voice trembled only slightly as he spoke. "He's not obeying me, he's relaxing with me." Copper's massive head lifted and his eyes softened, not trusting fully, but searching with hope instead of suspicion. And for the first time, Thomas whispered something only for Copper to hear. "You're safe. Not because I control you, but because you're learning you don't need to run anymore." Copper stayed. And in stillness sometimes souls meet halfway. The seventh day brought a dawn so quiet the ranch seemed to breathe slower, as if matching Copper's new rhythm. Morning light slid across the corral, warming the earth, turning dust into soft gold. Copper stood near the gate, not by accident, not by curiosity alone, but as though he expected Thomas. As if routine had become comfort and comfort had begun to feel safe. Thomas walked toward the pen without a bucket, without food, without anything to offer except calm. His boots pressed softly into the dirt, and when he reached the rail he didn't lean forward or call out. He simply stood and let Copper see him arrive without urgency, without demand. "You're here early," a ranch hand muttered behind him. Thomas nodded. "He showed up first. I only followed." Copper's massive head turned, ears focusing, nostrils flaring just once. Not a threat, recognition. Thomas stepped inside the pen again, slow as settling dust. He didn't sit immediately. He lowered to a squat first, giving Copper time to understand every movement. "I move slow because trust doesn't rush," Thomas whispered. "And because fear remembers speed." Copper blinked. Tail swayed lightly, a calm motion instead of a warning. Thomas finally sat cross-legged on the ground, not lowering himself in defeat, but grounding himself in peace. Then he did something new. He extended a hand, not touching, not forcing, palm open, loose fingers, soft breath. An invitation, not a request. Copper hesitated. His body shifted, weight transferring, breath catching like memory tugging at the edge of courage. Behind them, silence held every watcher still. One step. Then another. Copper stopped just a breath away, powerful chest rising and falling slow. Thomas didn't look at his eyes. He looked at the dirt between them, communicating something older than language. "I won't look you in the eyes until you feel safe enough to meet mine." Copper lowered his head, nostrils brushing the air above Thomas's palm. The ranch foreman whispered, stunned, "He's choosing him." A sudden sound cracked across the yard, a ranch dog barking sharply at a stray bird. Copper flinched hard, instinct flaring. Hooves dug in. Head jerked. Thomas didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Didn't reach. He only exhaled, slow, steady, showing the bull where calm lived. Copper trembled once, then stopped. He didn't run. He lowered his head again, closer than before, as if checking whether peace would stay this time. Thomas whispered, voice breaking just a little. "You stayed. That matters more than touch." And without ceremony, without applause, Copper's nose brushed Thomas's fingers, gentle, almost shy. Not claiming. Not surrendering. Just believing. And sometimes belief is louder than bravery ever could be. By the 8th day the ranch felt different, like the land itself understood something sacred was unfolding. Men who used to pass by without looking now lingered near the fence, boots planted firm in the dust, pretending to check tools or hay bins. But their eyes always drifted to Copper and Thomas. The ones who had laughed first now whispered instead. Not mockery, disbelief giving way to wonder. Copper stood near the gate again, but this time he wasn't waiting in tension. He was waiting in memory. Memory of calm. Memory of safety. The moment Thomas appeared, Copper lifted his head, ears forward, breath steady. It was not friendship yet, but it was no longer mistrust either. It felt like the beginning of remembering how to hope. Thomas entered the pen with no hesitation, but with gentle steps that honored the space. Today, instead of sitting, he knelt, one knee on the earth, one foot grounded, posture open as if saying without words, "I am here and I am not above you." "Morning," he murmured softly, not as a greeting but as a truth shared with the air between them. A ranch worker leaned in. "You think today he'll touch you again?" Thomas smiled slightly. "I don't think about touch. I think about peace. Touch comes later, peace comes first." Copper approached slowly, hooves pressing deliberate prints in the dirt. His eyes no longer darted at every shadow. His breath didn't shake with fear. He moved like someone learning that the world might not hurt him today. When Copper reached him, Thomas didn't extend his hand first. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, offering humility instead of control. Something in Copper responded. He lowered his head too, a gesture as old as trust itself. Then Thomas did something many handlers would never dare. He shifted his body slightly to the side, exposing himself, showing vulnerability. Copper flinched, confusion flickering, but he didn't pull away. He leaned closer, almost brushing Thomas's shoulder. Suddenly, a worker dropped a coil of rope behind the barn, not loud but sharp enough to slice the quiet. Copper jerked instinctively, muscles tightening like memories waking. Dust rose beneath him. But Thomas didn't rush to calm him. He didn't shush him or reach fast, he only breathed deep and slow, letting stillness speak louder than fear. Copper looked at him, not the noise. He looked at him. And in that moment, trust wasn't a gesture, it was a choice. Copper exhaled through wide nostrils, body easing, head lowering once again. A ranch hand whispered, "I swear that bull's learning from him." Thomas kept his gaze on the ground, voice soft. "No. He's remembering who he was before someone scared it out of him." Copper stayed beside him, not trapped, not commanded, but choosing presence. And choice is where healing begins and where it returns. On the 9th morning, the ranch woke early, not from noise but from expectation. Word had spread beyond the property now. Even neighbors slowed their trucks when passing, hoping to witness the strange, quiet miracle. Copper stood close again, not pressed to the fence, not pacing, simply waiting. It was a powerful sight. A creature once ruled by fear now standing in stillness by choice. Thomas entered the pen with steady steps, boots sinking softly into the settled dirt. There was a new weight in his posture today, not from worry, but from the quiet responsibility of trust earned and not taken lightly. He didn't bring food, didn't whistle, didn't call out. He simply breathed and let the morning wrap around them both. Copper approached first, one slow step, then another, his head low, ears relaxed. Thomas lowered himself into the same kneeling position as before, hands resting open, offering nothing but presence. The bull stopped inches away, warm breath brushing Thomas's sleeve. "You're making history, you know," a ranch hand whispered from behind the fence. Thomas didn't look back. "I'm just keeping my promise." Copper leaned forward, touching Thomas's shoulder with a gentle nudge. Not testing, not demanding, greeting. Thomas kept still, letting the bull choose the pace. Slowly, Copper nudged again, firmer this time as if asking, "Are you really here? Are you staying?" "I'm here," Thomas whispered. "I don't leave when it gets quiet." Suddenly, a young worker, excited by the progress, stepped closer and reached a hand out between the rails. Copper flinched, swinging his head, breath sharp. Dust kicked up. The worker stumbled back in fear. Caleb snapped, "Don't get close. He ain't ready for strangers." The young worker's face reddened. "I just wanted to." Thomas raised a hand gently to stop him. "Wanting isn't wrong," he said, tone soft, "but trust can't be rushed. He doesn't know your intentions yet." Copper's muscles stayed tight for a few seconds, hooves pressed firm into earth, but he did not bolt, did not swing wildly. He glanced at Thomas, fear flickering, then settling like a flame dying down instead of burning hotter. Thomas returned his gaze to the ground, speaking low, "It's all right. Noise happens. People move too fast sometimes. We breathe anyway." Copper's body eased. Slowly, inch by inch, his head lowered again until his nose brushed Thomas's sleeve, reassurance in the form of quiet contact. A hush fell across the ranch. No applause. No cheers. Just awe. "He chose to come back to you," Caleb murmured. Thomas placed one hand on his own chest and whispered, barely audible, "He chose himself. I'm just the reminder." Copper stayed close and the ranch felt smaller, not in size but in separation. For the first time, man and bull seemed like two souls sharing the same air without fear between them. And sometimes that is everything. Day 10 felt softer, like the ranch had settled into the rhythm of healing. The sun rose without hurry, warming the fence posts and casting long shadows across the dirt. Copper was already near the gate when Thomas arrived. Not pacing, not restless, but standing like someone who knew safety didn't need to be chased anymore. The old fear in his eyes had thinned. Something gentler lived there now, waiting patiently for the world to match it. Thomas entered the pen again, his steps quiet, his breath steady. This time he didn't kneel right away. He stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, letting Copper see him fully before choosing what came next. The bull lowered his massive head as if greeting him. It was not dominance, not apology, simply recognition. "You showed up again," Thomas murmured. "That's all progress really is." A couple ranch hands watched from afar, leaning on fence rails like church pews, reverence in their silence. One whispered, "I still can't believe it." The foreman replied low, "That bull ain't changed overnight. But the fear in him has been losing ground. Bit by bit." Thomas slowly knelt, grounding himself, then lifted one hand, open, still, non-intrusive. Copper leaned in again, brushing Thomas's palm with his nose. The contact was brief, but it didn't shake, didn't rush. It felt like a heartbeat shared between two lives that once braced for pain. Then something unexpected happened. A flutter of wings burst from the haystack, a flock of startled pigeons taking off. Feathers rustled, wings beat the air, shadows moved fast across the ground. Copper jerked back, instinct flaring. A few ranch hands stepped forward, ready to intervene if fear returned like a flood. Thomas didn't move. He didn't soothe, didn't plead. He only placed one hand flat against his chest, calm, steady breath filling the space between them. His voice was soft, a quiet anchor. The world jumps sometimes. But you don't have to. Copper stood frozen, body trembling. Then slowly, painfully slow, he steadied. His muscles unwound. His breath smooth. Instead of bolting, he took one step forward again, closing the space between them. He chose return over retreat. A worker whispered, shaking his head. He didn't run, he came back. Thomas smiled faintly, eyes lowered in respect. Fear will always knock, he said, voice gentle. But today he didn't answer. Copper exhaled, warm breath falling across Thomas's hands, and stood there, not conquered, not controlled, but choosing peace. Sometimes strength is not in holding ground. Sometimes it's in coming back to it. Day 11 arrived with a quiet pride in the air, as if the ranch itself finally believed. Boots scuffed slower across the dirt that morning, men talked lower, and even the cattle in nearby pens seemed calmer, as though Copper's peace was spreading like warm sunlight over cold ground. He stood close to the gate again, posture relaxed, tail swinging in easy rhythm. His body no longer braced for the world, it simply existed in it. Thomas walked toward the pen with steady footsteps, the same gentle rhythm that had stitched trust into each passing day. But today there was something new in his hands. Not food, not rope, an old, worn brush. The kind used not for training but for comfort, for connection. As he entered the pen, the ranch hands stiffened. "You sure he's ready for that?" one muttered. Thomas set the brush down softly beside him. "I don't touch him," he said, "until he asks." Copper watched, ears forward, curiosity flickering in place of fear. Thomas knelt again, offering his presence first before offering anything else. He didn't lift the brush. He didn't rush. He simply rested it in open sight like a promise without demand. Copper took a step. Then another. Slow, thoughtful, his hooves sinking into soft earth. When he reached Thomas, he lowered his head, brushing Thomas's shoulder lightly with his nose, not to test, not to push, but to greet. A soft, rumbling breath escaped him. Trust, fragile but real, trembled between them. Thomas waited. Breath slow, eyes lowered in patience. Then Copper moved, not away but to the brush. He nudged it gently with his nose, then looked at Thomas as though giving permission instead of seeking it. A ranch hand whispered, voice cracking, "He's asking him to touch him." Thomas picked up the brush slowly, showing every inch of movement, no surprises. He lifted his other hand and paused halfway to Copper's broad neck. The bull didn't flinch, didn't pull back. His muscles stayed soft. Thomas touched him, just above the shoulder, slow stroke, gentle pressure. Copper didn't tense. Instead, he leaned ever so slightly into the touch, a deep exhale leaving his lungs like a lifetime of weight rolling off. A silence fell, not fearful but holy. Caleb wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one saw. "Lord," he whispered, "I've never seen that in all my years." Thomas kept brushing Copper, soft, steady rhythm like he was brushing scars off the earth itself. "He was never wild," Thomas said quietly. "He was waiting for someone who didn't demand trust, but earned it." Copper closed his eyes, not in surrender but in peace. And in that moment, two broken things stood together, not fixed, but healing side by side. Day 12 dawned soft and golden, the kind of morning that feels like forgiveness. The ranch was quiet again, but not the same quiet as the first day, not a silence of fear or doubt, but a silence of respect, of arrival, of something sacred completed, yet still growing. Copper was already at the gate, standing tall, tail swaying slow, breath calm like the earth had finally stopped shaking beneath him. When Thomas walked up, Copper didn't just wait. He stepped toward him, closing the last bit of distance without hesitation. Thomas opened the gate fully today. The ranch hands tensed, but Copper didn't push out. He simply stood, waiting, like a student waiting for the teacher's nod. "You're free to come," Thomas said quietly. "Or you're free to stay. But the choice is yours now. It always should have been." Copper took one step, then another. Not in fear. Not in desperation. But in peace, the kind earned in small breaths, quiet moments, and gentle patience. He walked beside Thomas, not behind him, not ahead. Right beside him. Caleb watched from the fence, voice low. A bull like that walking free. I never thought I'd see it. Thomas touched the brim of his hat, not proud, not victorious, grateful. He didn't need to be broken. He just needed someone who didn't break when he remembered pain. And just then something unexpected happened, not dramatic, not loud. Copper nudged Thomas's arm softly, then rested his forehead against the side of Thomas's chest. A gesture of deep trust, not obedience, trust. Thomas placed a gentle hand on Copper's neck. You're home now. Not because you're owned, but because you're understood. A soft breeze drifted through the ranch, carrying dust, sunlight, and the quiet truth that healing had happened here, slowly, quietly, honestly. A ranch boy whispered, almost afraid to break the moment. So he's gentle now? Thomas smiled softly. He's still a bull. Strength never left him. Fear did. Copper lifted his head, eyes warm, body relaxed. A creature once labeled dangerous now breathed like peace itself. Thomas whispered, You didn't change who you are. You remembered who you were before fear. Copper didn't need words. His stillness said everything. Healing wasn't loud. Healing arrived like a sunrise, slowly and then all at once.